that today Amir Hashem, today we will take a deep dive into the minig of Kaporors, the custom we have to do Kaporors, which in Pittsburgh we're doing it today. The best time to do Kaporors, of course, is on Erev Yom Kippur, right as soon as we'll see what the best time of day actually is. It's two different opinions brought in the Arizal. And if you could do it earlier, do it earlier. We'll see there's different opinions and times when to do Kaporors. It is one of the earliest minhagim, customs of the Jewish people that we still have till today. Besides for the minhagim, the customs which are brought in Gemara, minhagei Yisrael, Kaporors is one of the earliest ones. So let's first start with the Gemara. Tadir v'sheini tadir, tadir koider. Mesechta Rosh Hashana, Daf Daled Amud Aleph 4a. The line starts Kiddushaninan. And we're holding the two dots. It's about 9 lines from the bottom of the page. Taner Rabban V'lir Galim. The Rosh Hashana for Yom Tiv. We said the first of Nisan is Rosh Hashana, beginning of the year for holidays. What does that mean? It means halachic definition, halachic difference would be when it comes to paying your pledge, filling your pledge. We said that the first of Nisan is a Rosh Hashana for the new year for count of Jewish kings. When you write in this year of the reign of this king, a Jewish king starts on the first of Nisan. Yom Tiv also starts on the first of Nisan. Gemara asks the question, what Yom Tiv is on Rosh Chodesh Nisan? There is no Yom Tiv on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. If you look at the calendar, Pesach is on the 15th of Nisan. So why does the Mishnah state that the first of Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah, the new year for the Jewish holidays? The new year for Jewish holidays should be a Jewish holiday. The Gemara answers, Amar Rav Chisda, Regel Shabai Rosh Hashanah l'Regalim. What the Mishnah means is that the month of Nisan has a Yom Tiv, has a holiday, which is Pesach, and the holiday in the month is the Rosh Hashanah for the new year. So the first of Nisan is a Rosh Hashanah for the month which has the first holiday of the year. The Rosh Hashanah explains that there's 3 Yom Tovim a year, and the first of Nisan, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, is the beginning of the year, meaning from the first of Nisan until the next first of Nisan, you have 3 Yom Tovim. But what's the difference in halacha? The practical difference. So the Gemara says, Nafkamina, here's a difference. L'noider l'meika malei beval te'acher. If somebody makes a pledge and says, I am going to give this and this amount of Karbanis as a pledge to the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Shimoni, and discussing the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, the Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Echra Noider, Vechra Makdish, Vechra Maidich, Kivin Shavalo Shlish Regalim, Oyver Malav, Vival Tiacher. Somebody donated money, pledged to give either money or a karban to the Beis HaMikdash. Whether he says, I'm giving the value of the person as the Torah determines a value of a certain age, or the giving a certain object, or says, I'm giving my value, however much I would be worth on the market if I was being sold, if a person was being sold as a slave. You have 3 Yom Tovim, 3 holidays of Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, 3 Yom Tovim to pay up your pledge. So let's say he did it before, he pledged before Shavuos, let's say, he would have to pay it up before the next Shavuos. If he pledged it a week after Sukkot, you have, or say a week before Sukkot, you have up till the next year Sukkot, you have 3 holidays, 3 Yom Tovim to pay up your pledge. Rebbe Shimon says you have more than that. You need to have shloisha regalim kesidran. You need to, in order, there's a transgression from the Torah, balti acher. Do not be late. Don't delay. It's a law, it's a prohibition in the Torah. And someone could be over an avera. The famous joke that somebody was, 2 Jewish guys were stuck on a desert island. They were shipwrecked. They were only survivors. And one of them said, no one's ever going to find us. The other one said, don't worry. I didn't pay yet my pledge to the Federation, Jewish Federation. They're going to find me. You have to pay your pledge within a year, within 3 Yom Tovim, 3 holidays. So the Tanakama says it has to be any 3 holidays, the next 3 Yom Tovim that come up. And Reb Shimon says has to be 3 holidays in order. The Chag HaMatzah is Techila, and the first Yom Tov is always going to be Pesach. So let's say a person pledged before Sukkot, he has until a year and a half or a year in order to pay up his pledge. It doesn't have to be a year, it could be even longer than a year. Rishon Bar would say the same thing. Regalim pa'amim shloisha, pa'amim arba'a, pa'amim chamisha. It could happen to be that a person will be only liable for the avera, for the sin of balti acher, of not delaying to pay their pledge to the Beis HaMikdash, sometimes with 3 holidays pass him, sometimes 4 holidays, sometimes even 5. Keitzad, how so? Nadar lifnei Pesach shloisha. If somebody pledged to bring a certain amount of money or a carbon to the Beis HaMikdash, if it's before Pesach, so then he has to bring it before the next Pesach, or rather before Sukkot, when 3 Yom Tovim pass. Lifnei Atzeres, if it's before Shavuos, if he pledged, Chamisha, because then he has to wait for Shavuos to pass, Sukkot to pass, and then once again, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot to go in order. Lifnei Chag, and if somebody pledged to give a donation to the Beis HaMikdash before Sukkot, Arba'a, he has to wait till 4 Yom Tovim pass, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Now, what's so important? The Pnei Yeshua asks over here, why is our Gemara have to give us a Rosh Hashana for pledges to the Beis HaMikdash? What's the practical halachic difference? A person doesn't get punished for it. He can't get malchus because he could always pay up his pledge later, and it's a lav anitek la'aseh. You can't get punished. There's also ein by ma'aseh. There's no action. So why do you have to make a Rosh Hashanah for this? What's the purpose of it? If it's only a heavenly thing. So he answers, the difference is if someone didn't give right away. So for example, let's say they had 3 Yamim Tovim to wait. And he waited till the end. So then he wasn't over anything. After Yom Tov, if he wanted to do it, but he couldn't do it because of an accident, it's not his fault. He's not over. And there's a halacha that if someone has a mitzvah that they have to do, they cannot spend more than a third of their money on the mitzvah. For example, let's say a person pledged a certain amount of money to the Beis HaMikdash, and then they realize to pay up that pledge, they're going to have to sell their house and sell their land. So you shouldn't do more. You shouldn't spend more than a third of your money. That's in order to do fulfill a mitzvah asay. To avoid a mitzvah asay, a prohibition of the Torah, a person must spend all their money in order to avoid a prohibition of the Torah. So the difference is when is an asay and when is a lois asay. For the asay to bring your karbanos in time, that we don't necessarily need a Rosh Hashanah for. But the lois asay, that when you start being over, when you start transgressing a prohibition of bringing your karbanos late, so then we need a Rosh Hashanah cutoff date. You want to know when you have to spend, instead of all your a third of your money. When's the cutoff date? You know you have to start spending more than that amount in order to fulfill your obligation. So the difference for the Rosh Hashanah would be is until that set time, the first 3 holidays that pass by, you have to spend only up to a third of your property, of your possessions to do it. And after that time, we need Rosh Hashanah to tell you that now you have to fulfill your obligation, even if it costs you more than that. If you look at the Gemara, now we're going to give another interesting another explanation on this Gemara from the first Satmar Rebbe, the Yismach Moshe, the grandfather of Rabbi Elish of Satmar. We brought this Gemara earlier, Yud Aleph. When was the world created? And we have 2 opinions. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua says that the world was created in Nisan. And Rabbi Eliezer says the world is created in Tishrei. Rabbi Eliezer says in Nisan we were redeemed from Egypt. In Nisan Mashiach will come as well. Rabbi Yeshua says, in Nisan we were redeemed from Egypt. In Tishrei Mashiach will come. And Rabbi Yeshua says, in Nisan we were redeemed from Egypt. In Nisan Mashiach will come as well. In Nisan Nasid Nigal. And what they're now, of course, every single opinion we explained is part of Torah. It's holy, and Elu Divrei Elokim Chaim. Each one of them is the words of Hashem. Chassidus explains one looks from the Ruchnius perspective, the Koyach, and one looks from the Poyel, the actual, from the physical perspective. Jewish kings have Rosh Hashanah in the month of Nisan, non-Jewish kings in Tishrei. When the first Geula took place in Mitzrayim, that was the Geula which took us out from the category of being avadim, of slaves, and we're essentially forever since then b'nei chayrin. we are free people, and even though we're temporarily in Galus, but we never could go back to having that same mentality. We are essentially b'nei cherin, or essentially people of Hashem. And when the Geula happened from Mitzrayim in Tishrei, in Nisan, it was already decided, already decreed and sealed and signed when the Geula will come. Right, so that's why Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer could say when b'Nisan nigalu and b'Tishrei sidin nigal. So do we look at when was it signed in Shemayim, or when will it happen down here? According to the opinion that in Tishrei we will be redeemed, so therefore, in the month of Nisan, it was written when we left Mitzrayim, when we will be redeemed in the month of Tishrei. Amir Hashem, let us be redeemed in this month of Tishrei. And according to the opinion, right, of Rabbi Yeshua that we will be redeemed in Nisan, so in the month of Nisan, when we left Mitzrayim, we were already written and sealed that the Geula will come in the month of Nisan. Now, if one of the famous Gemaras of Rosh Hashana, this is the real source. Rosh Hashana is a day of din, a day of judgment. Talking about the beginning of the year, the end of the year, how you judge the person. Every person is judged according to their actions, and he describes the difference between the tzaddikim and the Rishayim. So in Rosh Hashana, a person is, here it is. It says Rabbi Yochanan, 3 books are open in Rosh Hashanah before Hashem. You have the book of the life, the book of the opposite of life, and the book of the middle. Whoever is a complete tzaddik immediately is written and sealed for life. Whoever is not a complete tzaddik, whoever is a rasha, is immediately written in the other book. And those who are in the middle, they wait and see. They give him a reprieve until Yom Kippur. And he could do Teshuvah until Yom Kippur. And if you did Teshuvah until Yom Kippur, then you're written in the book of life. So this connects, how he connects with our Gemara. He says, if you go back to our Gemara, he said the machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and the Tanakam and the Chachamim is when do the 3 regalim, the 3 holidays, when does a count start in order to have the countdown when you have to pay up your pledge by? The Yom Tov, regel means, call it a holiday, Shalosh Regalim, regel means foot, 3 feet. We're not talking about a yardstick, we're talking about 3 times you have to walk up to the Beis HaMikdash. So you need Shalosh Regalim, 3 holidays. So the question is, which holiday is the first holiday? So if you look at the words of the Gemara, regel shebai. Right? The Rav Chisda says the regel, the month which has the festival which occurs in the month which is the first year of the new festivals. Pesach is the first. Shebai. So do we say that regel? We're talking about the holiday, the month which has the holiday of Pesach, or the month which has the regel, which has the time when you have to walk up to the Beis HaMikdash. So when does Mashiach have to come? Do you start counting from Tishrei, or do you start counting from Nisan? Do we want to say that Mashiach should not come, whether it comes in a way of Koyach, in a way of Payal, it's written and sealed already in Nisan when Mashiach will come. Meaning in the month of Nisan was already sealed when there will be regel, when we'll be walking up to the base of Mikdash, when Mashiach will come. And the difference is Bal Ta'acher. Bal Ta'acher means we don't want Mashiach to be late. The regel means going up to the Geula, and Nafkamina Lebal Ta'acher. We don't want him to come late. So being as in the month of Nisan, right? It was already judged. It was already decided when we left Mitzrayim when Geula will come. Whether according to Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Yeshua, whenever the world was created, but in the month of Nisan it was already decided when the Geula will come. We don't want Bal Ta'acher, we don't want Mashiach to come late. At least on Pesach should be written, should come in Pesach. Or at least in Tishrei should be able to come in Tishrei. So again, it flows in the words. You have to insert a little bit, but this is how Yismach Moshe, the first grandfather of Satmar Rav, how he explained this Gemara. Right? That what's the difference, halachic difference of if Rosh Chodesh Nisan we need the regel going to the base of Mikdash, which is Geula. The difference is about the Acher. We don't want it to be pushed off at all. So whether you start in Nisan, whether you start in Tishrei, we don't want it to be pushed off at all. And Rosh Hashanah is the idea of signing, which want to alter l'chaim immediately for Geula. Right, so that is just a nice pirush on this Gemara from the Yismach Moshe. Go a little bit into the topic of Kaporors. Now, Kaporors is a custom minhag. We're not going to discuss at all the idea of tsar b'alechaim, causing pain to the animal, because that is something is definitely forbidden. That's not the idea of this shiur. I'm just talking about the origins of Kaporors and the idea of doing it with a chicken, daf specifically. And we'll see there's sources of them from this in the Gemara and Shas, and we'll touch upon as much as we could today. There's two Jewish expressions to say if someone comes, or someone's involved, but they don't know what's happening. So they're listening to a shiur, not knowing what's happening. They say it's either like a han b'nei adam or yavan in sukkah. A han is the hen, the chicken, looking into the b'nei adam, looking into the words that we say, b'nei adam, children of man. When the chicken looks into the machzor, or looks into the words of Kaporors, it doesn't understand what it's saying. Or Yavan in Sukkah, Yavan is a non-Jew in the Sukkah, looks around, doesn't understand what the Sukkah is at all. So in order that we shouldn't be like a Han B'nei Adam when it comes to Kaporors, let's go through some of the original ideas, sources of Kaporors. We're going to bring from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and I think a good place to just follow along might be over here. If you want to have some more sources, go to Shulchan Aruch Harav, and he has a lot of good sources here as well, and about the idea of Kaporors. So I'm going to bring some of what he says, but a lot from what other people say as well. That's from Chabad.org. When did Kaporors, what's the original source that we have written clearly about what Kaporors is? So we have Rav Sheshna Gaon. Rav Sheshna Gaon, the Gaonim. Right, Gaonim were, here's the Tanaim who wrote the Mishnah, Amirayim. They finished about in the year 500. And the Sevarayim were beginning of the Gaonim, end of the Amirayim, were editing at times editing the Gemara, and then you have the Gaonim, which spanned a period of this is about the year 1050 from about the year 620, 650, so about 400 years the Gaonim spanned. You had great Gaon, Reb Hai Gaon, Reb Sadia Gaon was the end of the Gaonim, Reb Matarani Gaon, So one of the earlier Goinim, about the year 800, so right around here, was Rav Sheshna Goin. He was the father of Rav Amram Goin. The Goinim, we have many Svarim from them, but the Shulchan Aruch was only written only over here about the year in the 1500s. Until then, you didn't have a Shulchan Aruch. People were either very learned, or if you weren't very learned, you asked a Rav. But at that time was right after the Spanish expulsion, and there was great upheaval and confusion in communities all over the world. They're starting to find a new world at that point. And that's when the Torah and you already had the Rambam a little bit earlier in times of the Rishonim, the Rambam and the Torah and the Rambam, the Rosh, and the Rif, they would put together halachas. The Rambam was the most clear and concise. He had the son of, he had the Rosh, who also had Piskei Din of halacha. But most of the Goinim, most of their Svarim are not so much pilpul, they're more halacha. Answers what halacha is to do, because Shulchan Aruch was not around yet. From Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam wasn't as widespread, and there were different opinions in every place. So many of the Goinim, their Svarim are clear halacha. So Rav Sheshna Goin writes that the minig is to take an animal during the month of Tishrei, and to take it and do a kapara, calls it Kaporors, atonement. And he says he should use a chicken because a chicken was the most common animal. So someone asked him a question, if I want to use something else, is there specifically a chicken? So he says, use a chicken because chickens are the most common animal that you find around. And then he writes a second thing, that a chicken is called a gever, krois ha-gever. It's one of the times in the morning. Kreis ha-gever. It's when the chickens are able to, when they're quacking, when they make squawking, they make noise. And since chickens are called with the term gever, therefore you should use a chicken, because a chicken is also a kapara. It's atonement for the person. If the person was supposed to pass away that year, then you say that he does the teshuva and he gives it to the chicken instead, and it's a gever tachas gever, a person instead of a person. He also writes a similar thing, that on a seder plate, on a kaira, the common custom is to take a chicken bone, and he writes because that's what the most common animal that's around. So today, when most people don't have chickens in their yard, it's not the most common animal around. The second reason Rav Sheshna Goin writes that gever, the chicken is called a gever, and is gever tachas gever, a man for the chicken instead of a man, that reason is still valid today. Rav Natan Roy Goin, he is a very interesting back and forth. Someone asked him questions, and you have to realize many Jews were just not knowledgeable. There wasn't a Shulchan Aruch. It wasn't a cheder with a good curriculum. Everyone learned whatever they learned in their city, in their town. So someone was asking him about the simanim people eat on Rosh Hashana. Should we do this? Should we do that? Is it Darkei HaMordi? Darkei HaMordi is the Mordi, but it's just a general thing. People are very superstitious, and they do all different types of things. So maybe some of the simanim would be like a superstition, like Darkei HaMordi, which is in the Torah tells you not to follow the Darkei HaMordi. And so he answers that even if it's a nichush is almost doing something as like a good luck, as a charm for something, as a sign. It's different than when it's done l'tova for a good thing. And the Gemara Mesechta Krisos actually brings many of the sources of the simanim come from the Gemara about why we eat radishes and leeks, tradin, silka. And And he says, a nichush l'toiva, if you're being sort of superstitious in a good way, it's not a problem. Because when someone does an action, let's say they don't walk around under a ladder, they shouldn't have bad luck. So they walk around the ladder, and then they have bad luck anyways. So then they get upset. I did everything right, and I still had, whatever is supposed to happen happened. But nichush l'tova is that you're doing something as a siman, as a sign for us, so we should know to do the right thing. It's not a negative thing, and even if, God forbid, something goes bad, you're not going to say, hey, I didn't do it right. I messed up. I did the skula wrong. So such a thing is mutter, especially reminding us of Hashem and kapara. And he brings down, when do you do kaparas? Kaparas is 3 different times. Some have a minute to do it on Hoshana Rabbah. Some have a minute to do it on Erev Rosh Hashana, or Erev Yom Kippur. So there's 3 different times when to do it. It wasn't even a set time when to do kaparas by Reb Natan Roigain. One of Rashi's students is, he wrote the Machzor Vitry. He lived in the Vitry, a city in France. And he learned from Rashi. Rashi was about 900 years ago. Right in the times of the, let's say, 1100s. So Rashi, student of Machzor Vitry, he wrote a Machzor, one of the first texts of Shana Yom Kippur davening that we have. And he brings Kaporors inside of the Machzor Vitry. And he brings the source, and he says it's like the Sa'ir HaMishtaleach. It's like on Yom Kippur, they were in one of the avodas, in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Kippur, was to bring 2 rams, 2 goats that were identical. One was brought as a carbon to Hashem, and one was sent out of the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Kippur and pushed down the cliff. The Sa'ir HaMishtaleach was sent to the Azazel, to the Satan. And it says we take a kapara, we take a chicken, or not a chicken, we take an animal and we shecht it, like the Sa'ir HaMishtaleach, like the goat which was shechted in the Beis Hamikdash, which is sent to the Azazel, sent to the Satan. And therefore, he says we should use something like the goat, something with horns, like a ram or a goat, something with horns, to remind us of the Sa'ir Mishtaleach, to remind us of the goat or the which was sent away to the Azazel, pushed down the cliff during the times of the Beis Hamikdash, during on the Veda on Yom Kippur. Go over here, the Gemara. Let me just go back to the Gemara Mesechta Shabbos. Another interesting source. So we see so far, we have chickens, we have goats. We're going to see another interesting thing that was used for kaparas. Let's go to the Gemara. We see how Mesechta Shabbos, Daf Pei Aleph, Amud Beis, 81b, something called parpisa. Talking about different halachas, what you're allowed to use, what you're allowed to carry on Shabbos, what's muktzah, what's not muktzah. And the Gemara brings a story. Amar Rish Lakish, Ezra Rish Lakish. If you have, we'll do just the English part of the Gemara. It is permitted to use a stone. Then they had no toilet paper, fresh wipes, right? You're allowed to use a stone to wipe yourself on Shabbos when you go to the bathroom. And even if the stone has grass on it, it's not a problem, because that you're uprooting the grass, because it's not on purpose. You only had in mind to use a stone, not the grass. and so therefore you're allowed to use it. Amar Rav Papi, says Rav Papi, from here we see, Hai Parpisa Shari Litaltule. You're allowed to use a parpisa. What is a parpisa? A certain type of flower pot. And the Gemara is going to go back and forth whether you're allowed to use a parpisa, a piece of a flower pot, to use yourself to someone to wipe themselves on Shabbos. It was a flower pot that they would plant it with a certain type of grass, which would grow very quickly. And they put it on the ground. The question is if maybe the flower pot got a hole from the roots and they connected to the ground. And therefore, if you pull up the flower pot and to use a piece of the flower pot to use yourself, to clean yourself on Shabbos, you might be toilish, you might be uprooting something that's growing on Shabbos. And so the Gemara goes explaining what is parpisa, and says parpisa was a type of plant that they would grow. And so before Rosh Hashana, they would take it, they would wave it over their heads, and then they would throw it into a river. From here is actually a source, many people say, a source for tashlich. So taking our averos, throwing it into the river, they would take this grass, they would uproot it to say that now you're not connected anymore, and they would throw it into the river. But from here we do see that you do take something, you wave it over your heads, and then they would throw it into the river, or they would get rid of it as a kapara, as a way to atone for their sins. So many poskim, the Torah, the Tashbetz, the Rashi, they all bring this idea, and they all explain this whole idea and explain going on Kaporors.
Are they saying that you take the grass and rip it out from the ground?
So you put the flower pot on the ground, but if you pick up the flower pot from the ground, it might have been a root might have made a hole in the bottom of the flower pot, and it might be connected to the ground, and therefore you might be toilish. But they would put the flower pot on the ground. And the whole back and forth is putting the flower pot on the ground. So on Shabbos, am I allowed to take a flower pot and put it on the ground? Right? Is it considered to be zereya, planting? Because you're putting on the ground, it's maybe getting sustenance, getting some nutrients through whatever is in the ground. And in similar way, if I take a flower pot off the ground, am I uprooting? So, halacha is saying it's fine, it's okay, it's not a problem. But this particular parpisa was something that they would use in order to throw on the ground. There's actually another interesting Gemara. It's a story about Rav Kahana, and just for the purposes of brevity, we'll just do it very short. About if you find on the street. So it was a story of an Erev Kippur. There was they were having two Amiroim were having a meal together, and somebody came in and asked a question that they found some parts of a chicken on the street, parts of the bird on the street. Wanted to know if it's okay or not, and he said that it's okay because in Erev Kippur, the roiv, the majority of bird body parts you can find on the street are kosher. But why would it be kosher? Who's eating a meal on Yom Kippur? But rather because people are doing kaparos. So that's another source that people will be doing kaparos. Right? So if you want to look at Rashi, I'll just bring up the Rashi over here. Sorry. Let's go to the Rashi. They don't have Hebrew Rashi here. Here, Parpisa. See, Rashi says over here. Let me see if I can translate this. Translate selection to English. A name pot that they sewed in, and the answer, or geniuses of the Goinim. A day or two before Rosh Hashana, each one will make every little one in the house so the contents and grows the evening Rosh Hashana. Each one takes his and returns it around his head 7 times. Say one on the other, this is my kapara, this is my exchange, and they would throw it into the river. Yeah, so that's how Rashi explains Parpisa over here. So they would use a plant. They wouldn't even use an animal. They would use a plant for kaparos. So from here we see already a source that not necessarily is a chiyuv, an obligation to have a chicken. It could be something else as well. Right? And then we brought the other Gemara, which spoke about the chicken, the bird parts which are found in the street in Erevin Kippur. And he said it's kosher because, you see, even in times of the Gemara, they were doing Kaporors with birds, with an animal. But definitely from the times of the Goinim, which is shortly after the Amirayim.
I have a question. If they found bird parts on the street, does that mean the chicken was somehow torn apart?
Yeah. What it means is that it was somebody took it apart. It's a possibility, right? I'm saying that's why it was brought as a question. It's a possibility that maybe it was either an Anju who did it, maybe it was killed by an animal, by a stray animal. If we found it, could it be kosher? Could it be considered? Maybe someone lost it. Could they assume that it's theirs? So there, the halacha is, if it's found on the street, you go after roiv, the majority. If it's found in a house, then you don't go after majority. But if it's found in the street, you go after the majority. And on Erev Yom Kippur, the majority that you'll find in the street will be kosher. And therefore, you could assume that one is kosher as well. All right, so it's possible that it's. If you see a clear sign like teeth marks from an animal that tore it apart, that for sure wouldn't be kosher. For sure it was a type of cut that it could have been shechted properly and looked kosher as well. The Ramban, about 50 years after the Rambam, Rav Moshe ben Nachman, the famous debates, the Ramban, he writes pretty clearly and equivocally about the whole minhag, the custom of taking an animal for kaparos. So he is about the 1100s, and he says not to do it. It's darkei ha'emori, it's the ways of the emori, it's a superstition, transferring death from one to the other, and he says not to do it. The Rashba, Shimon ben Adares, one of the most famous Rishonim, one of the Rishonim whom we have the most Svarim from. He was a student of the Ramban, and he writes pretty clearly, also not to do kaparos, and he calls it darkei ha'emori. But you have to look at the entire context of the Rashba and the Ramban. And perhaps that gives us a context, as we'll get to that. Hopefully get to it soon. He writes regarding people had all types of minhagim, all types of customs. So one of the customs was when they moved into a new house, they would bring a chicken and they would shecht it in the new house. And they would use it for themselves. But that was one of the customs that they would have, maybe to ward off any superstition. And that and several other customs that were common around then. The Rashba says all these are from the darkei ha'emori. All these are things that are prohibited according to Torah, and you should not continue any of this, and he puts Kaporors as part of that as well. And he says that, however, the shochet who shechted, right? So the slaughterer who shechted a chicken to when you wanted to dedicate a new house to ward off any bad spirits, that shochet is a valid shochet. If a shochet shechted on Shabbos, even if he's a good shochet, but he's invalid from right, he can't be a shochet because he went against the Torah and his shechita is no longer good. But he says a shochet who shechted it is okay, it's fine, because there are people who say it's fine, but you should not do it because it's darker hamari. Any places Kaporors together with that. So it's very possible that the Rashba and the Ramban, as we'll see soon later on, the Rashba and the Ramban, they were in their times. There's a very big issue that people were having of going into all different types of, occultic type of things, trying to find signs and trying to find different, ways to ward off good luck, bad luck, and therefore he said you shouldn't do Kaporors either because of that. The Rebbe, also one of the Rishonim, he writes that the Rashba himself, who was a Talmud of the Raman, he himself would agree that if I give the chicken to tzedakah, so you shech the chicken for Kaporors, I give it to tzedakah, charity, it's not darker hamari, not the ways of the mardi. Because you're giving it to the poor, to charity, you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it in order to do another mitzvah with it. If you're doing it to make yourself a meal at home, or just for the sake of killing, that's a problem. But if you're doing it to give to tzedakah, then it's not darker hamari. What is the what did it say in Shulchan Aruch? Let's maybe go into here. So it says in Shulchan Aruch of the Mechaber, Rabbi Yosef Cairo. So Rabbi Yosef Cairo, he was right at the cutoff point between the Rishonim and the Achronim. 1492, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, that's the cutoff date between Rishonim and Achronim. And Achronim can't argue with a Rishon. So Rabbi Yosef Cairo, he was, as a young child of 2 or 3 years old, he was one of those who was expelled from Spain. And he was in Turkey for a long time. And then he ended up in Eretz Yisrael, in Tzfas, where he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. So Rabbi Yosef Cairo, as a Sephardi, the Sephardim generally followed the Mechaber, and if the Ramah says differently, Ramesh Israelish who lived in Poland, in Krakow, then we follow the Ramah. And the Mechaber writes pretty clearly that one should not do Kaporors at all. There are some later, not the first versions, but or later versions of the Shulchan Aruch, which says actually the words that it's a minig shtus, that he writes that it's a minig of foolishness. Many of the Achronim write that we don't find the Mechaber writing minig shtus in other places, and things which are a lot more questionable, which the Mechaber has a lot, which is, the Rebbe of Cairo has a lot more problems with. He doesn't use the word minig shtus, and they bring all types of proofs that it must be that the typesetter who put together the Shulchan Aruch is the one who added the words minig shtus. But he says not to do it, and following the Rashba and the Ramban, not to do Kaporors, which leads to a very big question. And I'm not holding anybody back, because if anybody wants to go, it's already 12 o'clock. I'm just going to continue, if no one minds. Which leads to a very big question. Why do we see Sephardim, who follow the Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch, why do we see that they're so careful about Kaporors? In many ways, much more than the Ashkenazim are careful of Kaporors. And if they follow the mechaber, they definitely they should not be doing it. Now, another question. Tell me, the mechaber wasn't aware of the ancient minhagim of doing kaparas, especially he traveled so much from Spain to all different places he was in. And the Arizal writes, right, to do it, to make sure to do kaparas, to do with a chicken and a white chicken. And the Rashba and the Ramban, they did not know the Kabbalah of the Arizal. They knew Kabbalah very well. The Ramban was a big Mekubal. His Pirushim on the Torah are full of deep secrets of the Torah. The Rashba was a big Mekubal. Beis Yosef didn't know Kabbalah. So you read some of the Svarim of the Beis Yosef, and Magid Nisharim of the Beis Yosef, it's full of Kabbalah. So of course they knew the minig of Mekubalim and the minig of the Arizal. So when the Beis Yosef paskins in halacha, or the Rashba and the Ramban, and the same thing the Alter Rebbe paskins in Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't always paskin according to the Kabbalah that they know. They're writing a sefer for Klal Yisrael, for all the Jewish people. And therefore, if it's a minig, if it's halacha, they don't write, even if they personally would do something different because of Kabbalah, they would they would do differently. So the minig of the Arizal was to do kaparas al pi Kabbalah, and therefore Sfardim follow the minig of the Arizal to do kaparas. And Me'idi writes something very unique and special, and he says that kaparas only really has value if you know what to do. If you're coming to kaparas like a Hanun Bnei Adam, like the chicken, looking at the words of the Bnei Adam, so then you're missing the whole point of kaparas. And then the Me'idi says that it's not. Me'idi was the same time as the Ramban, and one should not do kaparas then. The main idea of kaparas is that one must do teshuvah. And to say that instead of me, or instead of the person passing away, the chicken will pass away, it's only going to work if you look at it like a karban in the Beis HaMikdash, where someone brings a karban and says, they do teshuvah, they say vidoy, and they say that instead of me being deserving of any punishment, God forbid, this behemoth, this animal should receive it instead. But the main thing is the teshuvah. As we learned in mitzvahs videi teshuvah, the mitzvah of teshuvah in Derech Mitzvah Secha, we learned this probably 2 years ago, that every single avera has a guf and a neshama. Every avera, there's an action of the sin, and then there's a spirit of the sin. You could fix the action of the sin by rectifying it, so in this case is doing the kaparas, but the spirit of the sin, one, God forbid, left Hashem, that has to be fixed as well. Doing teshuvah. So it says a vidoy, saying the words is fixing, it's the guf of the avera, fixing the mitzvahs vidoy teshuvah. You have to verbalize, enunciate the words, because that is a body, and that makes a form to fix up to destroy it says the lahachris, to cut off the body of the sin, the physical aspect of the sin, the tangible aspect, and the spirit aspect, that happens through teshuvah. So kaparas, he says, is worth doing if one goes with the proper way of doing kaparas. But otherwise, it's almost, he says, it's like the Rambans could say, Dr. Hamardi, witchcraft, which is the reason why the Pri Chadash says not to do kaparas. And I guess I'm only about halfway through this year. We'll maybe finish this tomorrow. But we'll just bring the Alter Rebbe. Many of us are doing kaparas today, but I guess we'll hopefully retroactively learn some of the reasons of the word kaparas, 3 translations of the word kaparas, connecting it to 3 reasons of kaparas. how it connects to Hayom Yom. We see the Alter Rebbe, just in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Taf Reishei, says in these countries, it's our custom on Erev Yom Kippur to take a rooster, a male to take a rooster, a female to take a hen, to do Kaporors, atonement. Kaporors means atonement, cleansing, and redeeming. And we're going to go through all three of these ideas. And we're going to go through these things of these things of the Alter Rebbe, Mir Hashem, but definitely the minhag is definitely to do it. I think we'll continue with this tomorrow, Mir Hashem. Shekayach.